In order for me to be an elite Ironman triathlete, I have to be good at all three, and I can't just focus on one sport, the cycling that I'm the best at, because I got to work on my other ones and keep things in balance. As the miles add up, 5 miles, 6 miles, 7 miles, I'm now into the running rhythm, 8 miles, 9 miles, 10 miles. I've been drinking, gels and sport drink and bars now for about 7.5 to 8 hours at this point. After about 13 miles of the marathon, I've been racing for 127 miles. And at this point, that's when the Ironman really starts to hurt. I mean, your stomach is in knots, you've got cramps in your legs, your back, your hamstrings. It feels like someone has just taken a knife and they're just jamming it down your quads and just ripping it right off the bone. And it's at this point where people ask me, Jay, why do you do this? I do it for the finish line. It's a little white line in the road, but it is so much more. It has the ability to give a gift. I've been to that finish line, and that feeling is a drug for my soul. And I will do everything I have to crawl if I have to get to that line. So I want to ask you, do you have a finish line in your life? I know this organization, the JDRF, and many of you here in this room, the finish line is curing this disease. And that may be your finish line. I speak to a lot of corporations that they have a finish line of a product they're trying to get out to the market or overcoming something. But in your personal life, is there something that you want so bad that you would crawl to it if you had to? I'm going to give you a couple of pointers of how I think you can get to your finish line. The first thing, bad things are going to happen to you. You can't avoid it. Divorce, bankruptcy, in this economy, people losing their jobs, losing your home. I've been talking to a lot of people over the last couple of years of devastating thing happening to them. Or diabetes, or some other just devastating health condition of cancer. You have to make the bad thing that happens to you the best thing that ever happened to you. And high achievers understand that. They understand how to do that. I think some of you probably know Lance Armstrong. He's a great Texan from just down the road. And Lance Armstrong was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he was a great cyclist. But he said after he was diagnosed with testicular cancer, that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't know why I got the illness, but it did wonders for me, and I wouldn't want to walk away from it. Why would I want to change, even for a day, the most important and shaping event of my life? We all know what Lance did. He used that as motivation to win his very first Tour de France and then 6 other Tour de France, and then start an incredible foundation to provide hope and also funding for people that are dealing with cancer. Diabetes is the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't know why I got the illness. And people always look at me crazy when I'm talking to diabetes groups, but Jay, I mean, you could go blind, you could lose your kidneys and go on dialysis, you could lose your legs, your limbs, you could die, you could have heart disease, you could never see your kids grow up. I remember when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It was 19 years ago in 1991, and I was 24 years old. And I was getting sicker and sicker over the course of many weeks, and I ended up in the emergency room because I was living alone, away from my family. I was in graduate school, and I woke up in the emergency room, and I was in somewhat of a ketoacidosis coma because my blood sugar had been so high for so many days. And I remember sitting there, and there was a endocrinologist standing over me, and she told me that I had diabetes, and I've got tubes in my arms and tubes in my nose, and I was so weak, I had lost so much weight, I couldn't even lift my head. And I asked her 3 questions. I said, "What's diabetes?" And she told me. And I said, "Am I going to die?" Because I thought I was dying. I mean, it was something on my blood, and I couldn't eat the way I'd eaten, and I had all these complications. And she said, "No, And I said, is there a cure? And she said, no, not today. That was 19 years ago, and I remember after that moment, after just the depression and the anxiety and the nerves that I went through over the course and the days and the weeks, I realized that while incredible organizations like the JDRF that I want you to support, I want you to support them with your time and with your money, are trying to cure this disease, and while incredible organizations like Omnipod that are making insulin pumps for people like me to live our lives as best we can, my cure was up to me. I had to take responsibility in my life to live my life as best that I could. I wouldn't be racing the Ironman triathlon if I did not have diabetes. It became my motivation. I think of my racing the Ironman, I'm dragging the diabetes as a chain around my ankle for 2.5 miles out there in the ocean, and just drowning it out there in the ocean, and getting out of the ocean and taking it on my bike and slamming it down on the asphalt, and just ripping the flesh off of diabetes behind me for 112 miles, and then pounding it on the ground for 26 miles of the marathon. And I will use every muscle, fiber, cell, and calorie in my body to get to that line and collapse in the arms of the officials at that line. But I'll always have just enough strength to turn around and step on the neck of this disease and say, you are messing with the wrong guy. Make the bad thing that has happened to you, or the bad thing that happens to you, some of it may be more devastating than to others, use it as motivation. Make it the best thing that ever happened to you. My second point, and you may say, well, how do I do that, Jay? I want you to set some goals, but I'm a little bit different than most people. I want you to set some goals that you may not think you can achieve. Failure is good. It's kind of like the Michael Douglas in the old movie Wall Street, you know, greed is good. If you've never failed, you're not very successful. If you've never failed, you're not trying hard enough. And high achievers understand that. Jack Canfield wrote a book called The Success Principles, and he's one of the co-creators of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And in his book, he talks about this concept of failing forward, and that's trying something, maybe failing at it, and fail forward. You try something else until you just finally get there.